All great ideas are conceived while walking. This simple yet powerful quote invites us to reflect on the mysterious connection between movement and thought. Why do the most profound moments of insight seem to arise while we are in motion? Could it be mere coincidence that so many of history's greatest thinkers were avid walkers? Imagine yourself walking along a peaceful trail, hearing the crunch of leaves underfoot, feeling the natural rhythm of your steps. Your mind, once burdened by everyday worries, begins to lighten. Ideas that once seemed distant now flow with clarity. This is the phenomenon Nietzsche described, a meeting of the moving body and the awakened mind. Nietzsche was not only one of the most influential modern philosophers, but also a living example of how the act of walking can transform thought. He believed that philosophy, often seen as a purely mental exercise, needed to be lived through the body. Thinking is deeply tied to feeling, and walking, with its cadence and vitality, was the starting point for his greatest reflections. But Nietzsche was not alone in this belief. From ancient Greece with Aristotle's Peripatetics to modern figures like Thoreau and Wordsworth, the connection between walking and thinking is a recurring theme in the history of ideas. Perhaps there is something inherent in our very being, in our biology, in our essence as human beings, that makes physical movement a key to unlocking mental flow. In this video, we will delve into Nietzsche's world, exploring how walking was not just a habit, but a philosophy of life for him. And who knows? By the end of this journey, you might also find inspiration to set your feet in motion and unleash the power of thought in your own life. Friedrich Nietzsche was not a man of robust health. From a young age, he suffered from debilitating headaches, stomach issues, vision crises, and a physical fragility that would accompany him throughout his life. His condition distanced him from a conventional career and forced him to find alternative ways to cope with suffering. It was in this context that walking became essential, almost therapeutic. Imagine a man who, despite so many limitations, refused to be defined by them. Nietzsche saw movement as a way to transcend physical pain. Walking was not merely exercise, but a ritual of renewal. He believed that through walking, the body and consequently the mind freed itself from the chains of stagnation. His daily walks through the Swiss mountains and fields were more than a habit. They were his response to the fragility of his condition. The Swiss Alps in particular became a refuge for Nietzsche. He spent hours walking along steep trails, breathing in the fresh air, and listening to the sounds of nature. These moments of solitude were both a physical relief and an inexhaustible source of inspiration. Some of his most important works, such as Thus Spoke Zarathustra, were born during these walks. He believed that clarity of thought required more than silence or concentration. It required movement. Furthermore, Nietzsche saw walking as a metaphor for life itself. Each step, each obstacle overcome along the path reflected the constant struggle to surpass adversity. His philosophy, deeply marked by the idea of the eternal return and personal overcoming, was rooted in this experience of being in motion, both physically and intellectually. With every walk, Nietzsche proved that thought is not something separate from the body. On the contrary, it is within the body, in the pulse of the blood and the rhythm of the steps, that the deepest ideas find fertile ground. Walking, for him, was a form of healing, not just for a sick body, but for a mind that needed space to expand. Few landscapes seem as fitting for philosophical reflection as the Alps. Majestic and silent, these mountains provided the perfect setting for Nietzsche to develop his ideas. He spent long periods in towns like Sils Maria in the Swiss Alps, where the fresh air and endless trails offered him the freedom he so deeply valued. Nietzsche had an almost ritualistic routine. He would walk for several hours a day, taking occasional breaks to jot down ideas in small notebooks he always carried with him. He believed that the environment was fundamental in shaping the quality of thought. In his words, only thoughts reached while walking have value. For him, there was something about the rhythm of walking, the sway of the body, the synchronization of steps that seemed to harmonize the mind, allowing his ideas to flow naturally. It was in Sils Maria during one of these walks that Nietzsche conceived some of his most revolutionary notions. The idea of the eternal return, for instance, is said to have emerged as he contemplated the Silvaplana lake surrounded by mountains. This notion, which challenges the linearity of time and proposes an infinite repetition of existence, could not have emerged from a closed room or an office. It was movement and nature that brought him into alignment with such profound thoughts. The Alps, with their grandeur and timelessness, seem to reflect the very spirit of Nietzsche's philosophy. The mountains, steadfast and challenging, echoed his vision of the Übermensch, the overman, an ideal of overcoming and strength. Walking the alpine trails symbolized for him the human struggle. to ascend, fall, rise, and keep going. Interestingly, Nietzsche did not see walking merely as a means of producing philosophy, but as a philosophical way of life. Being immersed in the vastness of nature was, for him, a way to confront his own limitations and experience a state of freedom that cities and their restrictive habits could not offer. He rejected the intellectual confinement imposed by society, choosing instead a life more connected to the body, the environment, and the present moment. Through Nietzsche, we learn that thought does not need to be confined to a desk or a specific place. To think is to move, to explore the world around us, and to let it transform us. For Nietzsche, the body was not merely a machine that carries the mind, but the starting point for all experience and philosophical reflection. He challenged the ancient separation between body and spirit, so deeply rooted in Western philosophical tradition since Plato and Descartes. Instead, he saw the body as the foundation of life, creativity, and above all, thought. Nietzsche believed that traditional philosophy had neglected the body, treating it as something inferior to the mind or soul. However, he insisted on the opposite. The body is the true master. Our thoughts, emotions, and even our values do not emerge in a vacuum. They are profoundly shaped by our biology, senses, and movements. This perspective permeates works like Thus Spoke Zarathustra and The Gay Science, where Nietzsche emphasizes the importance of living fully with the body, of feeling life in all its dimensions. The act of walking, for Nietzsche, was a way to put this philosophy into practice. The movement of the body stimulated the mind, creating a flow between the physical and the intellectual. Walking allowed him to escape the limitations imposed by pain and illness, showing that the mind could elevate itself when the body was in harmony with the surrounding world. It was as if every step was an invitation to reflection, a dance between body and thought. Nietzsche also saw in the body a powerful metaphor. He believed that the philosopher needed to dance with life, and dance at its core is a bodily act. The lightness, rhythm, and freedom that come from physical movement were, to him, reflections of a healthy and creative mind. It is no wonder Nietzsche despised the ideal of the enclosed thinker, isolated in libraries or closed rooms. Thinking required being alive, and being alive required movement. In his work, Nietzsche also speaks of what he calls the great health, a state that goes beyond the mere absence of illness. Great health is the ability to embrace life in its entirety. Its highs and lows, its pains and pleasures. Walking, in this context, was a way to reconnect with this greater health, a practice that helped him transcend his own physical weaknesses and explore the vital force that still pulsed within him. Thus, Nietzsche's philosophy of the body is not just a critique of purely rationalist thinking, but an invitation for each of us to rediscover the power of living fully. The body is not an obstacle to thought. It is its greatest ally. There is something in the rhythm of one step after another that seems to organize not only the body, but also the mind. Nietzsche, with his unique sensitivity, perceived this and turned walking into a philosophical tool. He knew that the cadence of steps had an almost magical effect on thoughts, allowing complex ideas to emerge with clarity and fluidity. When we walk, the repetitive motion creates a sort of meditative state. It's not uncommon for problems that seemed unsolvable to suddenly become clear while we are in motion. Nietzsche, a thinker who often navigated between the depths of doubt and the heights of inspiration, found in the rhythm of walking a guiding thread to bring order to his chaotic mind. He used to say that deep thoughts require a slow rhythm. Walking along long trails unhurriedly offered the mental space necessary for ideas to develop organically. This rhythm, which respects the natural pace of both body and mind, contrasted with the rush and immediacy of modern life, which Nietzsche so often criticized. For him, the clarity of thought depended on this intimate dialogue between the rhythm of the body and the flow of ideas. Nietzsche also understood that the act of walking helped to resolve intellectual impasses. When stuck on an idea or facing creative difficulties, going out for a walk was his solution. He believed that physical movement stimulated mental movement, unlocking paths that had previously seemed inaccessible. It was as if the body, in moving, pulled the mind out of its binds, offering new perspectives. The influence of rhythm and clarity is also evident in the structure of his writing. Many of Nietzsche's sentences have their own musicality, almost as if they were composed to match the steps of a walker. His philosophy is not only profound but also rhythmic, reflecting the balance and flow of his daily walks. The rhythm of walking was, for Nietzsche, a metaphor for life itself. Just as in walking, thinking requires patience, effort, and a willingness to face challenging terrains. And, just like a trail, the intellectual journey does not always lead to immediate answers, but the movement itself is already a form of progress. By understanding the value of rhythm and clarity, Nietzsche teaches us that thinking does not have to be an arid process disconnected from life. Thinking can, and should, be a living, fluid, and deeply human experience, driven by the natural rhythm of our bodies in motion. Nietzsche was not alone in his devotion to walking as an essential part of thinking. In fact, he was part of a long tradition of philosophers who found in walking a way to expand their minds. From ancient Greece to modern thinkers, many of the great names in philosophy were also great walkers. Let us begin with Aristotle and the Peripatetics. The very name of this group derives from the Greek term peripatetikos, meaning one who walks. Aristotle used to teach while walking with his students in the gardens of the Lyceum in Athens. He believed that movement stimulated thought, and that ideas flowed more freely when the body was in motion. For Aristotle, thinking was not just an isolated mental activity, but something that involved the entire human being. Centuries later, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the Enlightenment philosopher, wrote in his Confessions, "I can only meditate when I am walking. When I stop, I cease to think. My mind only works with my legs." Rousseau took long walks in nature, and his reflections on freedom, inequality, and the connection between man and the environment were born during these moments of solitude. Like Nietzsche, Rousseau found in nature a space to explore the depths of his mind. Another great walker was Immanuel Kant. Though in a more methodical way, Kant was famous for his relentless routine. He walked every day at the same time through the streets of Königsberg. His discipline in walking reflected his philosophical worldview, an ordered world governed by universal laws. Despite always walking the same route, the daily movement helped Kant keep his mind sharp and prepare for the intense work of his philosophy. Henry David Thoreau, in turn, elevated walking to an almost spiritual level. In his famous essay, Walking, Thoreau states that a walk is a sort of crusade, a journey to reconnect with nature and oneself. Thoreau viewed walking as resistance to modern life and a return to the essence of being human. He, like Nietzsche, believed that the freedom of thought was inseparable from physical movement. This tradition remains alive today. Modern studies confirm that walking stimulates creativity and improves mental health, validating what these great thinkers already knew intuitively. Nietzsche, by joining this lineage of walkers, not only followed in their footsteps but also reinterpreted them, making walking a metaphor for his philosophy of overcoming and transformation. Looking at this rich history, it becomes clear that walking is not merely a casual habit for great thinkers. It is a practice that connects body, mind, and world. As Nietzsche and his predecessors demonstrate, the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other can open doors to ideas that change history. Nietzsche sensed something that, centuries later, modern science would confirm. The movement of the body has a direct impact on the functioning of the mind. Contemporary studies show that walking is not only good for physical health, but is also a powerful stimulant for creative thinking, memory, and even mood. Neuroscience research reveals that the act of walking increases blood flow to the brain, improving oxygenation and stimulating areas associated with creativity and problem solving. A study conducted by Stanford University demonstrated that walking, even indoors, can boost creativity by up to 60%. This helps explain why Nietzsche and other philosophers found inspiration so easily while walking. The physical act itself triggered mental processes that remained blocked during states of inactivity. But there's more. When we walk, our brain enters a state called divergent thinking, the type of thinking that explores multiple ideas and possibilities. This state is ideal for generating new insights and connecting seemingly unrelated concepts. Nietzsche, with his restless mind and ability to challenge conventions, seemed to be constantly in this state, propelled by the rhythm of his steps. Beyond creativity, walking also aids in emotional regulation, something Nietzsche desperately sought amidst his struggles with mental health. During movement, the body releases endorphins, chemicals associated with well-being. This may have helped Nietzsche cope with his depressive episodes and find emotional balance. It's no coincidence that he valued walking so much as a form of healing. Even though he didn't know the biological details, he felt its transformative effects. Another fascinating aspect is how walking impacts memory. A study from the University of Illinois showed that regular walks strengthen the hippocampus, a region of the brain crucial for memory formation. For Nietzsche, who carried his notebooks during walks, this was a practical tool. He not only organized his ideas but also solidified them, ensuring that his thoughts wouldn't be lost. Finally, walking outdoors, in contact with nature, amplifies these benefits. Nietzsche, walking through the Alps, experienced a state of immersion in the environment that we now call cognitive restoration. The simple act of being surrounded by natural landscapes reduces stress and improves mental clarity, creating the perfect setting for deep reflection. Nietzsche didn't have access to modern science, but his personal experience validated what we now understand more technically. He lived the connection between body and mind, and his philosophy invites us to rediscover this relationship. When we put our bodies in motion, we give our minds the freedom to explore, create, and transcend. I can only believe in a thought that has been reached outdoors, in movement. This quote reveals a truth that transcends Nietzsche himself. Walking is a simple act, yet it holds transformative power. For him, it was more than just a physical activity. It was a gateway to the deepest reflections, a way to live philosophy to its fullest. In an increasingly fast-paced and digitalized world, Nietzsche offers us a powerful lesson. He reminds us that true thinking does not occur in isolation or disconnection from the body. On the contrary, the mind and body function as a unified whole, and movement is the key to unlocking insights, clarity, and even inspiration. What's most beautiful is that this practice doesn't require great effort or extraordinary settings. Although Nietzsche found inspiration in the Alps, he also teaches us that any walk, anywhere, can be an invitation to reflection. The simple act of placing your feet on the ground and feeling the rhythm of life around you is enough to connect with yourself. So, the next time you feel stuck with a problem, confused, or searching for inspiration, remember Nietzsche. Try stepping outside and walking, letting your body find its rhythm and your mind set itself free. After all, as he believed, thinking is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a living, moving experience that begins with a single step.